So let's start talking about how we create advertisements. There's a few different techniques we can use in our ads that can, depending on the situation, increase the effectiveness of our ads. So there's a few things on screen here, more than a few things, and I've included videos in each of the modules that are going to follow this one. And it'll go through what each of these techniques are and have an example of them. So humor. Anytime we can be humorous with our advertisements, usually that's a positive thing. People like to laugh. People like that brightness in their day. Now, that's great for maybe capturing and holding attention, but it doesn't always necessarily lead to sales. So again, it depends on what your objective is. If it's just an inform objective, humor's great. Maybe not so much with the persuasion. Okay. Then we have emotional ads, and these ones are trying to connect to people's emotions, because anytime you can connect to their emotions, they become emotionally invested, then they become more connected to you, connected to your brand, more likely to get your product. So this will be good for those maybe interest and desire building, right? In that part of the IDA model. And also it'll help influence action. So any kind of emotions, it could be sadness, it could be happiness, right? Anything like that. Then we have lifestyle ads. And this is essentially any kind of ad that shows your product or your service actually in use. And it's usually by people similar to your target market. Gatorade is a great example of this, because anytime you see Gatorade ads, there's always people drinking Gatorade while they're doing their sport or doing their physical activity, right? You're going to see people running, you're going to see people lifting weights, you're going to see people playing soccer and all that stuff. So that's a good lifestyle ad, showing your product in use, in its intended use. Then you have celebrity endorsements, which are kind of interesting. And that's literally all it is they get a celebrity in their ad to endorse the product and say, this product's great. But it works, right? It might not convince people to buy it in the moment, but it works at positioning that brand in a more favorable light, right? We talked about positioning, that perception of how people think of your brand. If you can have a well-liked celebrity endorsing your brand, that can go a long way at positioning your brand to be better, even if it doesn't necessarily increase sales right away. Then we have demonstrations. This is where, usually infomercials, where you have somebody actually demonstrating how to use the product. And the last thing I want to talk about is something called branded content. Another word for this is sponsored content. And these are essentially ads that they don't look like ads when you actually go through and look at them. They're advertisements that offer a little bit of extra value to the consumer. So what do I mean by adding that value? Well, for example, we see this thing called listicles. And listicles are those, top 5 things to do in Vancouver this weekend, right? Top 10 restaurants you have to see. Those are actually advertisements, unless it's kind of like a blog post and someone's just doing that on their own. But usually they're advertisements, and those lists, those listicles, are advertising each of those restaurants in this article. So it does add value to the person who's reading it, because now they're getting recommendations on where they can go, what they can do, but it's still an ad. Same thing with sponsored articles. There's a good example in the modules about this. Sponsored articles are essentially an article written by the company themselves, or maybe by the industry or whatever it is, and it highlights that company in a positive light. The reader still learns something, right? Let's just say, for example, Tesla makes an article about the future of electric vehicles, or better, longer-lasting car batteries, or something like that. They're, of course, going to be talking about Tesla cars in there, so that's the advertisement for them, but people can still learn something from that article. And pretty much the same thing goes with sponsored podcasts. I'm not talking about when you listen to those podcasts that have advertisements halfway through and they kind of just shout out almost like a commercial. This is where a company actually sponsors an entire podcast around, again, either their company or their products or their industry, just like that article, that Tesla article that I just kind of made up.